Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. Thank each of you for your public service, particularly Mr. Jones, your service.
There's about an hour left in this hearing, which you can see at cspan.org. The Senate is coming back in after their weekly party meetings. Up next, they'll take a procedural vote related to the immigration bill. And if that gets the 60 votes needed to pass, senators may vote again, bringing the bill to the floor.
The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to S-744, a bill to provide for comprehensive immigration reform and for other purposes, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Aye.
Yeah. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Baldwin.
Aye.
No. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Bekich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Okay. Mr. Brown. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chiesa. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran.
I didn't even hear it.
Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cowan. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Flake. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heinrich, Ms. Heitkamp, Mr. Heller, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johann, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. King, Mr. King, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Ms. Warren, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Baldwin, Beckich, Bennett, Boxer, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Coons, Corker, Cornyn, Cowan, Durbin, Fisher, Flake, Franken, Harkin, Heitkamp, Hirono, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson, Wisconsin, Johnson, South Dakota, Klobuchar, Landrieu, Leahy, McConnell, Menendez, Merkley, Murphy, Murray, Nelson, Pryor, Reed of Rhode Island, Sanders, Stabenow, Tester, Toomey, Udall of New Mexico, Warren, Whitehouse, Wicker, and Wyden. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Bozeman, Cruz, Inhofe, Kirk, Lee, Risch, Scott, Sessions, Shelby, and Vitter. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Enzi? No. Mr. Barrasso? No. Mr. Rubio? Aye. Mr. Crapo? No. Mr. Donnelly? Aye. Mr. Schatz? Mr. Schatz? Aye. Mr. Thune? Mr. Thune? Aye. Mr. Chiesa? Aye. Mr. Balkus? Aye. Mrs. McCaskill? Aye. Mrs. Shaheen? Aye. Mr. Portman? Aye. Mr. Schumer? Mr. Schumer? Aye. Mr. Hatch? Aye. Mr. Cochran? Aye. Mr. King? Aye. Mr. Blumenthal? Aye. Mr. Kane? Aye. Mr. Hoven? Aye. Mrs. Hagan? Aye. Mr. Burr? Aye. Mr. Paul? Aye. Ms. Collins? Aye. Ms. Mikulski? Aye. Mr. Graham? Aye. Aye. Mrs. Gillibrand? Aye. Mr. Moran? Aye. Ms. Ayotte? Aye. Mr. Blunt? Aye. Mr. Coates? Aye. Mr. Grassley? No. Mr. Heller? Aye. Mrs. Feinstein? Aye. Mr. Rockefeller? Aye. Mr. Heinrich? Aye. Mr. Reed of Nevada? Aye. Mr. Roberts? No. Mr. Chambliss, aye.
Are there any senators in the chamber wishing to vote or change their votes? On this vote, the yeas are 82, the nays are 15. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn having voted in the affirmative, the motion is agreed to. Under the previous order, the time until 4 p.m. will be equally divided and controlled between the proponents and opponents. The senator from New York. The Senate will be in order.
Thank you. Okay, Madam President, I rise to speak to you today about the comprehensive immigration reform bill that we'll begin debating later today and for the rest of the month. I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for voting yes on the motion to proceed. Madam President, may we please have some order?
The senator deserves to be heard. The Senate will be in order. I ask senators to take their conversations out of the chamber. The senator from New York.
I thank my colleagues for voting yes on the motion to proceed that will let us debate this very important bill that is critical to the future of our security, our economy, and our society. This overwhelming vote, a majority of both parties, starts this bill off on just the right foot. Now, first, I want to begin by saying that this has been the most open and transparent process we've seen in the past few years. Unlike most bills where only 1 or 2 senators draft it, this bill was drafted by 10 of us here in the Senate. The 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats in the Gang of 8. I thank each of them, my 7 colleagues in the gang for their great work, and the agricultural program in the bill was drafted by Senators Feinstein and Hatch. Then we held a number of hearings and debated, considered, voted on, and adopted scores of amendments during the Judiciary Committee markup under the able leadership of Chairman Leahy. Many of those amendments were bipartisan, or were amendments offered solely by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. These amendments dramatically improved the bill. Our bill is better and stronger today than it was when we introduced it. Before the bill was marked up, this bill had been vetted by the 8 of us. Now, 18 of us here in the Senate have already had the chance to make our mark on this bill and consider all of the ways in which it should be changed. Now, we are here on the floor, where all of my colleagues will have the chance to further improve the bill and discuss the changes they feel need to be made. And we readily admit that this bill is not perfect and can always be improved. But it is undergirded by one thought about the present situation and one about the future that we hope to change. In the present situation, our country, amazingly and counterproductively, turns away hundreds of thousands of people who will create jobs and improve our economy. And at the same time, we let cross the border millions who take jobs away from American workers. The system is backward, and the status quo is unacceptable. Our bill is based on one simple principle: that the American people will accept and embrace common-sense solutions to future legal immigration and to the 11 million now living here in the shadows, if and only if they are convinced that there will not be future waves of illegal immigration. So our bill does 3 basic things. First, it ensures that we will never again have a wave of future illegal immigration. Second, it fixes our completely dysfunctional legal immigration system to make us the most competitive nation in the world for both this century and the next. And third, it contains a tough but realistic path for making sure that the people currently here illegally are held accountable for what they did, but it also allows them to join American society on our terms in a fair and honorable way than the current amnesty by inaction that we see today. I want to make it extremely clear that first and foremost, we are committed to ending the waves of illegal immigration that we've seen in the last 30 years. We will accomplish this goal by building a very sturdy three-legged stool of border security, employment verification, and entry-exit. I will now explain what our bill does in each of these areas to prevent future waves of illegal immigration. Make no mistake, our border will be secured as a result of this bill. We appropriate $6.5 billion up front in this bill to bolster our security efforts. That is in addition to the annual appropriations made for each year of border security. Before any legalization can even begin, the Secretary of Homeland Security is required to come up with a plan on how to deploy that $4.5 billion to acquire new infrastructure, technology, and personnel that will enable the Border Patrol to catch 9 out of 10 illegal immigrants that attempt to cross our border. Only after this plan is presented to Congress and deployment of the resources has commenced may the legalization program begin to adjust undocumented individuals to registered provisional immigrant status, what we call RPI status. Then, all of the resources in the plan must be deployed on the ground and be working before anyone in RPI status can ever be granted a green card and gain citizenship. After 5 years, if the Border Patrol is not catching 9 out of every 10 illegal immigrants that attempt to cross the border, a commission with border state governors and elected officials will be empowered to make recommendations on how best to spend an additional $2 billion that this bill has already pre-appropriated in order to achieve this 90% effectiveness rate. Now, with minimal resources, with many fewer resources, we are more effective at the border. The effectiveness rate has gone up from 68% to 82%. Imagine what will happen with the resources we provide in this bill, all of which is paid for by provisions in the bill, both fees for those who wish legal workers to come work for them and fines on those who have crossed the border illegally. DHS will implement the recommendations of the Commission after they have been presented to the Secretary. Now just think of this. Crossing the border without permission from the government is a crime. When we catch someone crossing the border, prosecute them and deport them, we are solving the crime and punishing the criminal. Our bill will deploy the resources needed to catch, prosecute, and deport 90% of the people who cross the border illegally. 90% of all border crossing cases will be successfully closed. How does that closure rate compare to other violations of our laws? According to FBI statistics, each year we successfully catch, prosecute, and detain wrongdoers in less than 50% of the cases where a violent crime has been committed, and less than 20% of the cases where a property crime has been committed. Think about the much higher standard that our bill is creating for border security. 90%. Everyone knows 90% is an A grade, and our bill will achieve an A-rated border. Now, for days and weeks, I have heard senators who would oppose any immigration bill saying that our bill does not secure the border, as if these $6.5 billion do not count. If you have a better idea, tell us. But to say that this will not improve border security, you may disagree with whether it's the best way to do it. You may disagree whether it does enough. But don't say it won't do anything to secure the border. History shows that, of course, it will. We believe, the 8 of us, that it will do it well and do it strongly, better than anything, far better than anything that has ever been envisioned. Now let's take a look with what we can purchase for this money. We're going to be building $1 billion worth of border fence. Our bill requires it be built before anyone can get a green card. Our bill originally had $500 million more allocated from fencing, and the fencing money was actually decreased by the senior senator from Texas, who thought we were building too much border fence in our bill. Second, we'll be purchasing sensors, fixed towers, radars, and drones that will cover the entire southern border. When this technology is deployed, we will finally be able to see every single person crossing our border, and we'll know where to send our 21,000 Border Patrol agents to go catch people. I visited the border with Senators McCain, Flake, and Bennett. It's huge. You can't station enough people on the border. There are no roads in large parts of it. But with the drones, you can see every single person who crosses the border day or night, and you can follow their paths so they can be apprehended when they're 10, 20, 25 miles inland. It's a huge improvement. Simple math tells us we have more than one Border Patrol agent for every city block of the southern border. Imagine how low crime would be if we had a police officer on every block. And imagine, once we deploy this technology, how effective that will be. For those who say the American people did not trust the government to get the job done, I say let's look at the facts here. Providing additional resources to DHS for border security has an incredibly proven track record of success. In 2010, Congress passed an emergency supplemental appropriations bill for border security. I worked on that with my colleague from Arizona, Senator McCain. It was $600 million. In 2009, according to the GAO, the national effective rate for the entire southern border was 72%. In 2011, a year after this was deployed, it went up to 82%. Again, saying that this will not improve border security at all, saying that there is no security at the border, that is not fair, that is not right. I would urge my colleagues not to say it. Again, you may disagree with how, you may disagree with how much. There's a heck of a lot of border security in this bill. Most of the resources in the supplemental budget went to the Tucson border sector. In 2009, the effectiveness rate at the Tucson border sector was 71%. In 2011, it went up to 87%. Given that a mere $600 million supplemental appropriation was able to increase border security effectiveness from 72 to 82%, it's reasonable to assert that spending over 10 times that money on border security in the form of a $6.5 billion supplemental appropriation for personnel, infrastructure, and technology will allow us to apprehend 9 out of every 10 people who try to cross the southern border illegally. Second, visa overstays will be identified and apprehended when this bill passes. An estimated 40% of the 11 million people in unauthorized status are individuals who entered the United States legally but overstayed their visa. When a foreign national enters the country, he or she is fingerprinted and his or her passport or visa is electronically scanned against our security databases. But amazingly, when this individual exits the country, no such scan occurs, leading to uncertain information about who's overstayed their visas, and 40% of those who are here illegally do not cross the border. Rather, they overstay their visas. Now, for individuals who entered the United States by air or sea, we will require those individuals to swipe their machine-readable passport visa on an electric scanner at the gate immediately before exiting the United States. To prevent identity theft, when the person swipes their visa or passport, their picture comes up on a screen at the gate, and the gate agent being given the passport has to match the picture on the screen with the person giving their passport. The exit information will be given to all of the Department of Homeland Security components to generate an accurate overstay list of people who entered the United States by air or sea. Persons on this list will be apprehended, detained, and deported by ICE. Persons entering the United States from the northern border will also be identified as exiting the country via the northern border when they're granted entry into Canada. And that's because the United States and Canada are willing to share entry information such that each country will be providing the other with de facto exit information. Now, there is criticism leveled by opponents of immigration reform that the exit system must be biometric in order to prevent visa overstays, and that using passport or visa pictures instead of fingerprints will not work. Although this criticism is not justified because we will be using picture matching to prevent identity theft, our bill phases in biometric exit capabilities as our largest airports. During the first 2 years of enactment, the bill will require taking of biometrics leaving the United States through the 10 largest international airports. It'll go to 20 more in 6 years. If it works better than the photo match system, we'll phase in the print system nationwide. But the photo system, we believe, is just as effective and much, much cheaper. Why do we need to spend billions more to achieve the same result? In any case, the key to our bill is that we'll ensure soon after passage, even as this biometric exit system is being deployed, we'll be able to detect, detain, and deport individuals who enter the U.S. legally from Canada by airport, by seaport, and then overstay their visa. We also make the completion of this system a trigger for the path to citizenship. The path to citizenship can't happen unless this entry-exit is deployed. Third, even if a small number are able to cross the border legally or to overstay their visa, neither system will be perfect, they will not be able to find work legally in the United States due to our bill's mandatory employment verification system. Even if someone is able to get here illegally or overstays their visa, their main goal for being here, working, will be impossible after the bill is passed. That's why we have illegal immigration. The people who cross our borders, they're very poor people. They're living in poverty, most of them. And they want a job. They want some money. If they can send $10 home a week to their wife or father or children, they'll cross the border to do it. But if they can't get jobs, they're not going to come. We have 11 million people here today, and we don't have a problem whereby these folks are besieging us with terrorist acts. They are simply working and feeding their families. If we eliminate the jobs magnet, we'll eliminate illegal immigration. Under this bill, every employer seeking to hire a worker must determine, using our employment verification system, whether that prospective employee is here legally and can work. If the prospective employee is either a non-citizen with work authorization, a U.S. citizen with passport, or a resident of a state that agrees to share the driver's license with DHS, and all 50 states now have photo driver's licenses, then the prospective employee will have to produce that form of identification to their employer. It will have to match up the photograph pulled up on the E-Verify database in order to work illegally. And this will eliminate the identity theft problem that plagues the current E-Verify system. If the prospective employee is a U.S. citizen who does not have a passport or is not from a state that shares driver's license with DHS, then that individual, they're a very small number, will have to answer questions about their identity generated randomly for their Social Security number in order to prevent identity theft. Credit card companies have used this system to huge and positive effect. Employers who do not use E-Verify or who hire illegal workers will be given severe penalties and be jailed for repeated violations. And I know many on this other side have said, make E-Verify mandatory and permanent. We've heard that for years. Now, all of a sudden that we've done it, it's not good enough? Fourth, This bill will also fundamentally alter the cost-benefit analysis for coming to the United States illegally by creating a new W visa worker program to encourage people to come here legally. Because of the bill's significantly enhanced border security, entry, exit, and employment verification, any person intending to come to the U.S. illegally will have to take great safety risks at great personal and financial cost to come here. Once they're here, they will find that there are no jobs available here to support themselves. Alternatively, they can choose to come legally and work as part of our W visa work program that is created for individuals to work in jobs where employers cannot find American workers, but only if they can't find them. Up to 200,000 visas a year will be made available for this purpose. We start with a program that can grow as our economy grows and creates more jobs and is flexibly related to the rate of unemployment. In addition, a new agricultural program will be set up to replace the previously illegal flow of agricultural workers. Given that the Census Bureau and the Pew Hispanic Center have estimated the illegal flow in past years to be around 400,000, there should be enough visas to meet any demand for additional workers that might exist. If more legal workers are needed, the newly formed Bureau of Immigration and Labor Market Research can provide additional visas to permit more workers to enter in occupations they find have shortages of workers. Given these new programs, it will no longer make any sense for intending illegal immigrants to spend tens of thousands of dollars and risk their lives to come here illegally. Illegal immigration will be a thing of the past. Fifth, the bill will protect American workers in 4 ways. Because of the new employment verification system, Americans will no longer have to compete for jobs with unauthorized workers who can easily be exploited. I say to so many of my colleagues who are worried about this, I ride my bicycle around Brooklyn early in the morning. I see on various street corners congregated, young men mainly. And some guy on a truck comes over and says, I'll give you $15 to work on roofing on a few houses I'm building. I guarantee you, he doesn't say to them, I'll pay you $2 above minimum wage and give you an hour off for lunch. Those illegal immigrants are driving down the wage base, particularly in lower-skilled places. That will end. Second, in the bill's legal worker programs, Americans must be recruited first before any worker will be hired. In addition, all foreign workers will be required to be paid the same wage as an American would be paid for that job, meaning that a foreign worker will never be hired to undercut an American worker's wage. And finally, foreign workers will be given portability to change employers if they don't like their current employment situation. This means that employers will no longer choose foreign workers over American workers because they have more control over those workers. Finally, this is also a very fair bill, and we have, of course, I don't go into it here for lack of time, an H-1B system and a system that says if you are a foreigner who studies in an American college and gets an MA or PhD in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, you will get a green card. These are the very people who in the past have created new companies and created tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of new jobs in America. Now they want to come to America after they study here or stay in America. We send them away and they go to Canada and Australia. That won't happen anymore under this bill. Finally, it's a very fair bill on legal immigration and resolving the status of the people who are here. We create a system, as I mentioned, that allows America to attract and retain the best and brightest minds from around the world in science, math, finance, technology, the arts, and more. Fundamental to maintaining America's preeminence in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. We also provide a JOLT, J-O-L-T Act, to our travel industry, making it easier for foreign nationals to come to the United States and spend their lucrative vacation dollars here instead of somewhere else. And of great importance, and perhaps the dividing line between some in this chamber and the rest of us, we give the 11 million people here a chance to come out of the shadows and earn a path to citizenship after spending 10 years on probation, working, keeping their nose clean, learning English and civics, paying their taxes. It is a tough path to citizenship, but it is a fair path, and it's a path that we make sure will happen, provided the specific metrics in our border security provisions are met. Our bill requires all of these important enforcement resources I have described to be put in place before we give the individuals a path to citizenship. That is a fair thing to ask. We in the Group of 8 agree. The federal government should have to put the resources in place that we promised as necessary to get the job done. That is entirely within our control, and we will live up to our word. But by the same token, we will not leave these 11 million people in immigration limbo forever. It makes no sense to have people living here permanently who are not invested in America. This is the huge mistake that Europe has made. We see the ill effects every day on the news of what happens in European countries who have not integrated their immigrant populations. Those populations became affected by a sense of alienation, a lack of opportunity, a lack of upward mobility. Well, that is not America. Here, we give people the chance to be all they can be through their hard work. We want people here to be serving on juries, serving in the military, and saying to people that they are just as American as anybody else. In my city, Mr. President, city in which I was raised and in which I live, is that beautiful lady in the harbor with that bright torch. That has been America. And that lady has said through the centuries, if you come here and work hard and stay clear of the law, no matter who you are and what your economic level is, we welcome you. We want you to become an American. We're not going to take that away. That would be just as dramatic a change in this country we love so as tearing up the Bill of Rights. It's been part and parcel, warp and woof, of America. To those who say have some secondary status, to those who say let's put in the bill an excuse so that someone 3 years can say no one can become a citizen, we say no. We have some basic principles we will not compromise, and that is at the top of the list. So, in conclusion, I want to send this message loudly and clearly to all who might hear it today. We are interested in compromises that will make this bill even stronger and more secure. Our group does not claim to have a monopoly on wisdom. We will hear out any of our colleagues from either side of the aisle who have good faith suggestions on how to improve this bill. I've heard some who say we should not consider any further changes to the bill. Dare the other side to vote against it. I reject that approach. We're not interested in scoring a political victory to help one party. We're interested in passing a law that changes the awful status quo, solves the problem, and makes America an even better and greater place. Just because the process has been to date so encouraging does not mean we can take anything for granted. So we welcome constructive input from our colleagues, and we want to work with them. But the one thing none of us will do is condition the path to citizenship on factors that may not ever happen in order to appear tough. We're committed to border security. We're committed to ending illegal immigration. But we are equally committed to allowing people the right to earn their way to become an American citizen if they work hard, play by the rules, learn English, and avoid criminality. Just as I believe to my core that border security should not be a bargaining chip, I also believe to my core that leaving people in immigration limbo, uninvested in America and its successes, is also something we should not do just in order to pass a bill. We recognize that there is always more that can be done. I commit in good faith to every one of my colleagues in this chamber who want to work with me to improve the bill, that I'm open to any ideas. But for those of my colleagues who will not support this legislation, I simply ask the question, how would you solve this problem? The answers are not simple. That's why it's taken us months to get where we are today. This bill represents our best chance for a broad bipartisan compromise on a complex issue that we have had in decades. I hope all of us take this opportunity very seriously. I hope we all do what we can to show the American people that their lawmakers do still have the ability to solve difficult problems that affect every one of our daily lives. With that, Mr. President, I ask that my colleagues will agree to work with us in good faith to improve this bill and give a resounding vote from both sides of the aisle of support for this bill when it comes to final passage. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Texas.
I very much want